Landlords across Ontario are being hit with tens of thousands of dollars in demands and, in some cases, property requests by tenants in what's called cash for keys deals. So once landlords submit an order to vacate the property, some tenants refuse, and that leaves landlords with very limited options. So joining us for more this morning from Manhattan, New York, is David Fleming, real estate expert. David, good morning.
Hi, Anne-Marie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. David, can you start off by explaining what the principle of a cash for keys deal is? Typically, we think about it not in terms of like tenants, but in terms of homeowners. How is this a little different?
So essentially, when a landlord gives a legal notice to vacate and the tenant says, I'm not going to leave, I would like to go to landlord and tenant board. Whether this is because the tenant is taking advantage of the situation or whether this is because, they truly don't believe that the landlord has this right, it can take 8 to 12 months sometimes to go to landlord and tenant board. So then the landlord has to make a decision. Do I wait to go to landlord and tenant board, or do I buy out the tenant? And so what we're seeing specifically in Toronto is a lot of times the landlords are simply buying out the tenants.
So according to a report that's been published by the Office of the Ontario's Ombudsman, this is in spring 2023, there was a backlog of more than 38,000 cases. 90% of those were landlords who were just waiting for a hearing. How do long wait times impact landlords and their rates?
Well, once upon a time, if you gave a legal notice to vacate and the tenant said, I'm not leaving, you could go in front of the landlord and tenant board in a few days, and then the sheriff would come and they would take the tenant out. They would put their possessions on the front lawn sometimes, and that was it. Now, with there being this backlog, and with the landlord and tenant board not being able to get to a lot of these cases, sometimes upwards of a year, I think it's given a lot of tenants the idea that, well, wait a minute, if I don't want to leave, why don't I buy myself some time? And at the risk of giving people that are watching this some really terrible ideas, this is happening with an increasing frequency. And it's not right. It's not just. There's a moral dilemma here on behalf of the tenants, but a lot of them are doing it.
Average rents went up across the country by 11% in 2023, with Toronto remaining one of the most expensive cities in the country. So how does the current rental market factor into this discussion? Because we hear cases about landlords who want to increase rents to keep up with market value. So how much should tenants be compensated?
Well, legally, if a landlord gives you notice to vacate, they have to provide you with 1 month's rent. The issue is that, let's say that a landlord is giving notice to vacate because somebody has bought their condo. That buyer is allowed to give notice to vacate. Now, if that tenant says, I don't care, I'm not leaving, I want to go in front of the LTB, it could take 8 months. And in 8 months, that buyer has walked away. And when you get in front of the LTB, some of the board members are going to say, where's your buyer? And you say, well, they walked away 8 months ago, obviously. And then the LTB says, great, come back when you have another buyer. And this can perpetuate over and over. And we're effectively forcing this individual to keep this condo against their will that they're trying to sell. So the ramifications of this are pretty grave. And I think that if we continue to see this backlog, I don't know what it says for the future of landlord and tenants in the province of Ontario, and specifically in the GTA. So I understand you're making the point about rents increasing, and I'm sympathetic, but I don't think that excuses the nature of tenants taking advantage and in some cases saying, sure, I'll leave, write me a check for $30,000.
Yeah, and there are, arguments on both sides. In Ontario, we have the Residential Tenancies Act. How do other provinces compare? How do they respond to this situation? Because the housing crisis and rental rate increases are a countrywide issue.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned I'm in Manhattan right now, so I'm here for a real estate conference. Last night, we were talking about this segment that I was going to do. I talked to people from all over North America. Not a single person could comprehend anything that I was talking about, no matter where they're from, in the United States or Canada. I didn't speak to anybody that has anything similar in their states or provinces. So, this is provincial legislation. Obviously, we have our act, BC has their act, and whether or not somebody is compensated 1 month or not, it's really the backlog at the LTB that's the issue. And then, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes members of the LTB are taking matters into their own hands. And, there's been cases where you ask for an eviction because, your son wants to move into the unit that you and your family own so that they can go do their MBA at the University of Toronto. And then the board member at the LTB says, well, I think the tenant needs the unit a little bit more than your son, considering he's living at home with you. Dismissed. I mean, I believe in the rule of law. I really do. And I think that once you step into that gray area, it's making things pretty difficult.
So, David, that's the question that I had for you is at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the law. Is it illegal? What does the law say?
I mean, it's a gray area. The law is, ask any lawyer, there's no black and white. Law is completely gray. So if the N12, which specifies you or a member of your immediate family are moving in for a period of 12 months or more, and you don't just say a member of your family, you check a box that says mother or caregiver or son, and then you submit that, and then the tenant says, I'm not leaving, I want a hearing. When you go to the LTB, they should say, oh, okay, your son's moving in, no problem. Case dismissed, tenant removed. But what we're seeing a lot of the times is that we step into this gray area where board members are really thinking this through and saying, who needs the unit more? And that's where I just completely fail to comprehend where we are in society right now, where, you know, you're saying, well, you own this unit and you would like to live in it, but this other individual who's been given legal notice needs it more. So I don't know where we go from there.
Really quickly, what can landlords do to protect themselves?
Choose your tenants very carefully. But even still, I mean, look, if a tenant moved in tomorrow and stopped paying rent, you're not going to get in front of the LTB for 8 to 12 months. And even then, you have no guarantee you're going to get that rent. So landlords have to be extremely, extremely careful, and they have to be diligent. They have to be hands-on.
David, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Anne-Marie.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.